Bonsoir à tous et bienvenue à l'Institut français du Royaume-Uni. Mesdames et messieurs, chers amis, welcome to the Institut français du Royaume-Uni. Welcome to you all to Avignon on the Bridge, celebrating the 77th Festival d'Avignon, and its focus this year on the English language, which will be at the heart of the festival. Dear Tiago, together with our British friends, we have built a tunnel many years ago, and it was high time that we built a bridge spanning all the way to Avignon, and it's thanks to you. We are very grateful to you because you decided to invite English language, but you'll tell us why and how in a few moments. We are also delighted here at the Institut Français to be once again teaming up with our friends of the British Council. And Avignon on the Bridge, we really thought about it as a three-dimension initiative or program. In addition to this evening, we will have the pleasure of welcoming Tiago Rodrigues at the Lycée Charles de Gaulle, at the Lycée Français Charles de Gaulle tomorrow. Tiago will meet about 100 students from the lycée, together with their French, English, and drama teachers. And our students, our pupils, will discover the Festival d'Avignon, the Festival d'Avignon's renewed vision in relation to young audiences. The third dimension is our cross-channel theater program for the translation of French texts or adaptations of performances into English. And this year it will also be dedicated to the Avignon Festival, and we very much hope to foster French production in the UK. So this year Avignon will be once again a great meeting place, and it will also be a meeting place that will bring France and the UK a bit even closer. We know that there will be many discoveries. Several of the texts or productions by British artists will be performed for the first time, not only in Avignon, but for the first time in France. And it's a great development. I would also like to mention two plays that concern our American friends. Welfare, directed by Julie Deliquet, based on the film by Frederick Wiseman, which will open the festival in the Cour du Palais des Papes. And Baldwin and Berkeley at Cambridge by the New York-based company Elevator Reaper Service. Dear Tiago, we have, and dear friends, we have two words in French to say, to translate language. And by inviting la langue anglaise in Avignon this year, you propose not only to speak the same langue, but also to speak the same langage, the one we have in common and that we can largely share. The language of arts, theater, culture, and the values that are common to them and that bring us together. I would like to express my special thanks to our partners who have made this evening's event possible, the Institut Français in Paris, the French Institute Trust and its patrons circle, the British Council and the Institut Français d'Écosse, with its director, Laurence Pais, and the Institut Français d'Écosse, our friends in Edinburgh, are following us live on stream as we speak, and they will join us later also for the discussion. And with us tonight, lots of friends and lots also of artists who will be featured in the festival, Andrew, Pauline, Tim, Vicky, and Alexander. And I would like very much to thank all of them for being with us tonight. I would also like to thank my team, and especially Isabelle and also Mathilde, but really all the team of the Institute. There's been a lot of collective effort put in this endeavor, and the team has been working hand in hand with the festival, and in particular with Virginie de Crozet, who I thank warmly for this beautiful collaboration. Let me just say a few words about the evening as it will unfold in a few moments. In the first sequence, Tiago you will be in conversation with Andrew Todd. Andrew, you are, I can't see you. Yes, you're here. You are an architect and a writer, and you have co-authored the book Open Circle, Peter Brook's Theatre Environment. You write regularly on art topics in France for The Guardian, and you are also contributing to the Financial Times, France Culture, France Inter, and the BBC. You have designed France's first neo-Shakespearean theatre in Ardelot, c'est dans le Pas-de-Calais, which won a Warren Award for the best wooden building in the world in 2018. And your new book, The Clearing, about trees, forest, and grief, will be published in May 2023 by Nybergrade Press. There will be, at the end of this first sequence, a first Q&A, and then Tiago Rodrigues will be joined on stage by Pauline Bale, the new director of the Théâtre Public de Montreuil, Tim Crouch, Vicky Featherstone, artistic director of the Royal Court Theatre, and Alexander Zeldin for Zeldin Company, and all the plays will be performed this year at the Avignon Festival. Without further ado, I'm very happy to give now the floor to Cortina Butler, Deputy Director, Arts and Cultural Engagement in the British Council, our precious partner for this event, and I wish you a wonderful evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bertrand. I'm delighted to represent the British Council at this event. Thank you. To launch the Avignon Festival for 2023. And we are so pleased to be supporting the festival again, especially in a year with a focus on the English language. As an organisation devoted to building connections, understanding and trust between the UK and other countries through arts and culture, education and English language, we value the great festivals of the world, and Avignon is truly one of them, for creating wonderful opportunities for artists from the UK to share their work and engage with audiences and culture professionals. In the recent past, we are proud to have supported artists at Avignon, such as Simon McBurney, Wayne McGregor and Akram Khan, and we worked with the festival and Sherwood Arts in 2018 to bring 40 next-generation arts professionals to see new work and experience the magic of Avignon, many of whom had never visited the festival before. We're delighted to accompany Tiago and the new team in this new creative chapter of the festival through the focus on English language for 2023. It's particularly happy timing for us as it coincides with the publication of a major new piece of British Council research, The Future of English, which looks at the key themes shaping the development of the English language and its role in the world. In spite of the many challenges of the last few years, this feels a time of opportunity and momentum, with the bilateral relationship coming to the fore once more, a successful UK-France summit, and our own UK-France Spotlight on Culture programme, Together We Imagine, Imaginons Ensemble, to be announced later this year. I'm joined by my colleagues from France, Country Director Anne Duncan and Head of Arts Sarah Bagshaw, who can tell you more over cocktails later. I would like to thank our friends at the Institut Français in London for putting together tonight's event, Bertrand Buchwalter and Isabel Mansi, as well as the Festival d'Avignon team, particularly Tiago Rodrigues and Magda Bizarro. And finally, a very big thank you to the artists for taking part in tonight's event and at the festival this summer. And now I'm delighted to hand over to Tiago and to Andrew Todd. Thank you.
Good evening, bonsoir. It is an immense pleasure to be here, and thanks very much indeed to the British Council and the Institut Français for organising this. On a personal note, I've been covering the Avignon Festival for The Guardian every year since 2014, and I've been attending a long time before that, and I've pretty consistently been the only UK-based journalist there, and feeling very, very lonely. Telling the story of the festival, inciting English people to be interested in it, and it is absolutely fantastic to be having this event and to be building these bridges and to be sort of making the kinds of conversations happen which have unfortunately been sort of stifled by recent geopolitics. Now, I was astonished to discover yesterday when we were discussing this that Tiago has never performed his work in England. And I would like, just for those of you who don't know anything about him, just to sort of say a few words about what we've been able to experience in Paris very recently, and then end with a question about how that sort of leads up to and translates into what's going on in Avignon this year, and then start to open up the major themes of this year's festival. I'm sure you're very, very curious to know all the details about the programming, which was absolutely wonderful. I think it's very, very clear that there's a huge sigh of relief in the French theatre world about the quality, the diversity, the richness, and then also, you know, the presence of the English language is very, very important for us here tonight. So, Tiago, if we just go through one calendar year of your production in France, if we go back to last year's Avignon Festival with your adaptation of Iphigenia, which was incredibly sculpted and clear and fresh and original. And then following on, almost immediately from that, you had, I think, 5 shows on simultaneously in Paris. Dans la mesure de l'impossible, which was a very morally challenging and rich show based on documentary sources about people working in very harsh humanitarian environments, which was mostly in English. I think it's a production from the Comédie de Genève, but it's a polyglot show, but you know, kind of based in English because it's in an international world. Le Chœur des Amants, the Choir of the Lovers, which is a kind of chamber piece for 2 actors, a couple, who are essentially sort of performing their journey through life together, often working with simultaneous speech in chorus between themselves. So a very kind of high wire act on a bare stage with no scenography. Dans la mesure de l'impossible, there was a wonderful stage setting of a huge sort of tent that would eventually sort of rose up throughout the performance. And then Caterina and the Beauty of Killing Fascists, which was at the Bouffe du Nord, which, as you'd guess from the title, is also a very, very sharp and challenging drama about the morals of contemporary politics and the limits of tolerance. Now, that was in Portuguese. So here we have someone who is at ease writing for other people in a very inspiring way, working across a whole range of languages and a whole range of scenographic modes. And now he's working with a team of 700 people in our premier festival in France. But he's not putting himself in the front line. He's only doing one piece in this year's Avignon show, which was actually his first piece. And my first question to you, Tiago, is if you could perhaps explain By Heart, which will be closing the festival on the 25th of July in the Cour d'Honneur. This is also, as you'll see, it's a show about communication between languages, across languages. And it's also, you've described it as your passport to France, this show. So I'm very, very interested to find out how you, the festival's first foreign director, have sort of made your way, and what's the ground that you're walking on as a hybrid, as a foreigner, as a European, as an international figure, and how is that somehow the basis of what all of your wonderful colleagues are going to be doing in this year's festival?
So we're going to do this standing, right?
We don't know. We can
No, it's fine. It's fine. I just wanted to be sure.
It's showbiz.
Okay. Much better. So, Andrew, thank you so much. I was not expecting the self-promotion introduction. Yeah, it's just not my job to talk about my work. But I'll give you some hints. I wanted to, acknowledge and really thank Institut Français for in London for having us here, for bien sûr Bertrand et Isabelle et all their team for having us. Also the British Council, thank you so much for supporting not only the edition but also this visit to London. It's very important for us to be here, to be able to have a meeting where we can deepen the effort that hopefully we'll share with audiences not only from France but from all over the world in next July, and also to share about what the festival is, although you might have heard about it because it's been around since 1947, and it's like it's a big deal, but also to give you some detail of what the experience of living this festival, participating. We don't say going to the festival, like the audience of the festival, they say they do Festival d'Avignon this year. And that gives you a measure of the engagement of the audience, of the passion of the audience which is present in Avignon, and also of this sort of storm of ideas and desires and urgency around arts that you feel in Avignon during the month of July. So hopefully some people today will know a bit more about the festival, about the work we're going to do this summer, but mostly also with some wish to do the festival, not only visit but do it. So answering your question, Andrew, because I want to be nice, although the subject of that one, Tiago, is not my favorite subject in the world, but I started working in France a long time ago as an actor with a Belgian company, TG Stan, a company from Antwerp, and this was my introduction to France. Actually, I didn't speak any French at the age of 20, 21, but because they were working in France, and I had been working with them in English, they asked me once in English, because that was the language we spoke among us, and still is, even if we perform in French. They asked me in English, is your French good? And I said, ça va, which is one of the two things I could say in French, ça va and merci. And they invited me to do a piece in France, Les Antigones, which was presented, created in Toulouse, in Théâtre Garonne, and later presented at Théâtre La Bastille in Paris, which are my homes in France from a very early age. And they just bought it, and they invited me. So I enrolled Alliance Française in Lisbon. I studied hard for 6 months. I arrived in Toulouse. I started rehearsals, and they were very disappointed. But I thought, like, you should have heard me, beyond ça va 6 months ago. So that's my introduction to France, which was, it was a country that had hosted already my father as an exiled from the dictatorship in Portugal, where I had many, I had a taste of France in my background, and of course of French authors, but I had no relation with the French language or with France itself, and so it started that way. And later on, doing my own work, one of the pieces which was very important was By Heart in 2014, because there was this invitation from Théâtre de la Bastille for me to do a French version. So there I really had to work even harder, because it was a solo, and it was, let's say, the piece that made me almost a French artist, in a sense, that since that moment, since 2015, I work almost as much in France than in Portugal. That's to say a lot, because in Portugal for a while I was the director of the National Theatre in Lisbon, and still I was working almost as much in France as in Portugal. So of course France nourished, the performing arts in France nourished a lot of what my imagination for theatre is, but it's also, a big part of my path. And doing By Heart now at the end of the festival, just for one night, one shot, it's a way to share with the audience of the festival a part of my history with France, which is like now a big history, because I live in France. I've moved to Avignon, and I'm fortunate to be the first non-French or the first foreigner to direct this festival, which is such an important symbol of not only French culture and arts and history, but also of this of French values of the Republic, of being open to other cultures, curious about other cultures, defending diversity and plurality in society and in arts. So it's really let's say a dimension of French society that I'm really willing also to stand for and fight for. So with By Heart, it's a piece that started with my grandmother, that invited me to. My grandmother, we had a big relation with literature. She was, at a certain point, she was becoming blind, and she asked me to choose one last book that she could learn by heart, because she loved to learn by heart, and that she could keep in her memory. once she would be blind, she would only read this book by heart. So, and by heart is the story of me looking for that book, and all the little stories and anecdotes and thoughts that I could collect while looking for that book. That I ended up giving to my grandmother. So it's a piece that started while I was still looking for the book. I was already writing the piece, and at a certain point I was performing it. And it's now 10 years that I perform by heart, and it felt like, I mean, it's so connected to my history with France that it felt like a good way to meet the audience at the end of the festival after all the important stuff that brings us here today has happened.
So you could say, ça va maintenant.
Merci.
No, I think it's an important, I mean, everyone is very, very curious. We've had a director for 9 years who performed quite a lot of his own work. But this kind of openness and generosity and this acting as an impresario and the festival itself, I think it's important just for those of you that have never been there to sort of situate the uniqueness and the buzz and the power and the force of basically taking over a whole city, hardly using very, very few conventional theatre spaces, using every sort of corner, every square of the city, working, you know, sort of night and day, often in very, very difficult conditions, 40 degrees during the day sometimes. Last year there was a forest fire which sort of invaded the town. So it's, you know, it's you have a feeling that some very, very important global issues are extremely present there, and they barge into the festival. Tiago, you said, I mean, as you sort of move in and decide how, you know, how these spaces are going to be brought to life, and perhaps new spaces we can touch on as well that are coming back, you said something very interesting in your press conference about how the fabric of the city, so the city obviously going back to, you know, the popes in the 13th century established themselves in Avignon. The magnificent papal palace is the, you know, is the sort of the stage that was first created by Jean Villard in 1947 after the war, the same birth point as the Edinburgh Festival, obviously. And it's still the sort of the holy grail of French theatre. It's an extremely difficult space. It's a 50-meter wide stage, and it's practically more geological than architectural. You know, it's these enormous stone walls which sometimes fight against the show, sometimes, you know, welcome it and somehow amplify it. Now, you said, what I thought was very, very beautiful, was that you know, the monumental character of Avignon has been transformed by theatre, that somehow there's another layer. I mean, a monument being, you know, a building that recalls and remembers something. There's another layer, even on these, you know, kind of enormous stone walls of Ariane Manouchkine, Pina Bausch, Romeo Castellucci, all the incredible things that have happened there. So could you tell us a little bit about how you're going to sort of move into this incredible nest, and how you feel about bringing it to life this year?
Well, one of the big dimensions of this genetic code of this festival is the way it connects history, patrimony, the past, memory, and research, and innovation, and experimentation. So that has been this idea of the great library where you write. You know, so this idea where you have the great books while you're writing. So this sort of contradiction, this marriage, not a predictable one, but a very happy one between you know, the weight and the importance of the canon and research. And that which defies the canon. It's really something that throughout the history of Avignon developed itself, and it's, for me, at the heart of what the festival is. And it's visible because, yes, you could say that the walls of Cloître des Carmes are amazingly filled with history, but also with the presence of the radical approach to stage of Angelica Lidl. For instance, so you have this. That's that tension, which is very important for us in thinking about what the festival is, which is a place of easy access to a sort of joyful complexity. That's something we really defend at the festival. It's a popular utopia. It comes from Villard, the Villard that in 47 says after the war there's a huge division in society, and art can, with complexity, sort of be a tool of connection, so that all these different people would sit in the same row with different backgrounds and for a moment in equality watch a same work of art facing the same mystery and the same problems and the same joy, and then afterwards recuperate their difference while talking about a shared experience. And that would be some sort of element of cohesion through the arts. This is, you know, a big part of the utopia of Jean Villard in 47. And then later, 20 years later, in 67, he believes that this is only feasible or possible if he opens up to the international and to a plurality of aesthetics. And that's when he invites, in 67, he invites Godard, Jean-Luc Godard. He invites Lavelli, young Argentinian director. He invites Béjart. So he invites the world, but also totally different aesthetics to be sharing the same space in connection with history, but sort of writing tomorrow. So this tension is really interesting. And when we talk, for instance, about inviting a language every year, yes, there's a wish of translating into something, into a frame of mind, the international, I would say even internationalist spirit of Festival d'Avignon, but also to translate this tension. The patrimony of the English language, not versus, but with new writing or you know, the diversity of the many English languages that you can write for the stage today. So it's really at the heart of Avignon to have fun with contradictions.
So inviting English is not an act of convenience necessarily. It's not. I mean, it might appear to be an obvious thing to do as a global language, but the way you've talked about it, you're actually looking to enrich the language. You're actually looking to take different sources from Canada, from Africa, and you're trying to actually challenge the English language in a way in your approach to the programming of this festival.
Well, the first thing that led us to the inviting languages is that in Avignon you have this history of connection with repertory and repertory theater and text theater. So for us, it was a tool to have new layers of freedom when you deal with what repertory is, what the issue of text on stage, speech, the power of writing. So languages would would put words at the center of the festival without obliging us to put a specific aesthetic or way of producing theater or performative work at the center. It would just like create more freedom, more complexity, but also I think more joy. The joy of translation, the confusion of translation. It's also a way to say that from Avignon we don't look at the world divided into nations or nationalities or people, but connected through languages, problematic languages, sometimes with heavy past, languages that dominated other languages, that killed other languages that are in civil war. The language, but symbolic, poetic approaches to what the world is today and how to deal with the past. And on the other hand, when it came to, but which language to start with, yeah, you could say that English being so global would be a way to, yeah, okay, English will work for anyone, not only English-speaking, native English-speaking people, but you have to remind yourself that you're in France. So there is a tension between the English as a threat also, and that I found interesting. So this dominant English, which is a threat to a language, a very rich language as the French language, that is troubled by its place in the world today. So this tension, once again, this sort of happy contradiction. Felt like an interesting thing for a foreigner to bring to France. And it would bother a few people, and this I felt like it was my duty to do so. And on the other hand, I think we think English is, we know it very well, the English language, because many of us speak this globish, this broken English, this European English, in order not to lose our train, for instance, or to cross the border. And now that's a big reality, to cross the border into the UK. So that was a feeling that I thought, like, yeah, the access to a superficial layer of the English language should not be mistaken with real knowledge. So I thought that behind this veil, or we thought, because I mean, there's plenty of people here from the team, and I want to acknowledge them. Virginie de Crozet, head of communication. We have Géraldine Chailloux and Magda Bizarro, the two programmers, much more responsible than I am for this, I believe, wonderful choice of performances. Pierre Gendronneau, deputy director of Festival d'Avignon, and Anne-Mathilde Tomaso, head of production of the Festival d'Avignon, so who are sort of representing 700 people who work at the festival, and because we could not bring 700 people up, I mean, there's limits to the hospitality of Institut Français and British Council. So, and also to the room. But I was saying that when we thought, because it's a collective work, when we thought of the English language, it was also because we believed that behind this veil of accessibility, there's a richness, a history that is sort of at risk. And it was wonderful to see that, particularly in France, when the program got out, some people that were a bit reluctant towards the English language as a choice went like, oh, now I get you. Because there's a lot of discoveries, although some artists in the program and English-speaking artists are already well known in France, which would be the case of Tim Matchells, who's here with us, Alexander Zeldin, who maybe already arrived, but he will do so before he has to come on stage. But surprisingly, other British or English-speaking artists, I would say, like, for instance, I find it quite incredible that Tim Crouch is not a household name in French theaters, or Vicky Featherstone and the Royal Court, for instance. So this idea that there's a lot of to discover, and here I'm just like in the land, because the program is wider than the UK. It had a feeling of discovery, and people reacted really up till now really curious about this. Oh, behind this wall of English dominance, there's a lot of richness and inventiveness, and also history to be in touch with again. And then just to close my arguments towards the English language as a choice, of course it's a reaction to Brexit, because although we're not amazing at building bridges in Avignon, we're really not good at it. I mean, it's been centuries that we try to finish it, and it just doesn't get to the other side. We thought, like, if we do a bridge as good enough as the Pont d'Avignon is right now, maybe, you know, our British friends could build the rest while we throw it here, and we would have something to fight the political idiotic walls that have been built the last years.
Absolutely. So that bridge would have led you out of Avignon, and one thing that you're doing with quite a lot of programming this year, including with Tim, is reaching out beyond the city. And there's one canonical space which was opened in 1985 by Peter Brook, which I'm delighted to see you're taking the care to reopen it, and also reopen it with a bang, which is the Boulbon Quarry. So you would sort of take the bridge, jump in the river, swim 20 kilometers upstream, and then in the middle of Provençal, landscape, there's this huge limestone quarry which Peter chose for the Mahabharata because he didn't want to play in the Palais des Papes because he found that it was too historically specific. So let's get into a few specifics of the programming. This is a space which is going to be opened by Philippe Ken. And can you tell us a little bit about what's motivating you to give such a vast, kind of renewed canvas, and maybe how, as a sort of an act towards ecology and geology, perhaps how that sort of reflects specifically to the past of the festival.
Carréal de Boulbon is this mythological but real space. As you said, in 85, Peter Brook found it, and it was found for him, and it existed since he did the Mahabharata there. And unfortunately, for financial reasons, the festival had abandoned it. And arriving Avignon, it was one of the first questions that everybody would ask. Both audience members, artists, technicians, the team, everybody would go like, and what about the quarry? What about the quarry? What about the quarry? And yeah, we thought that it was a sort of symbol also of scale and a sort of craziness and spirit of adventure that I think that even in the most dire economic moments, Festival d'Avignon has the sort of obligation to keep for the performing arts world, saying that a part of what we do is also looking at limitations and sometimes being a bit wild and crazy and following like the desire and the urgency of an artist and just going for it. Of course, trying to be as responsible as possible, but it's not creating festivals as a translation of problems, but creating festivals as a sort of research, a lab for solutions against the problems or beyond the problems. So that was what we lived and are living still with recuperating this quarry, which is a big venture. It's months and months of work of hundreds of people, but we will start a new piece by Philippe Ken, Jardin des Délices, the Garden of Delights, upon the Hieronymus Bosch painting, this sort of retro-futuristic post-apocalyptic tale, mixing medieval, Western, and science fiction. This sort of cosmic poetry, which is so typical of Philippe, that we thought would be an artist, really, an amazing artist to propose for this coming back to Boulbon, that we will, of course, now manage and invest and occupy with a much more conscious ecological and also territory conscience, because we're trying that the people from Boulbon, which is a small city village next to the quarry, are also part of the whole adventure, and that there's this ecological dimension, not only symbolic because it's also a natural space and a very beautiful landscape, but also the way that we manage this place and that we turn it into an open air theater, that it would be something that answers to the responsibility that we have with landscapes and the natural world.
And you also are sponsoring an entirely new project by Caroline Barneau and Stéphane Kegi, which will take people out of the city, off the bridge again, downriver, which is called Paysage Partagé. Now, I mean, it's palpable and obvious out there in the theatre world. There's a sort of upsurge of questions about the place of the theatre, the institution of the theatre, why we go inside to watch shows. Avignon is very, very particular in the French theatre landscape, and many of the theatres in France are have a very similar format. But when finally Avignon comes around, you can see a huge diversity of spaces, something which in the UK you're quite used to. Things have been sort of seeded in a slightly different way. So tell us about this really unique project, which I've been tracking from its sort of early stages in Lyon last year, which will take people on a very, very long sort of durational parcours with different projects in nature, and how that fits into your ambitions and your poetry of this festival.
So Paysage Partagé, Shared Landscapes, is a piece with 7 performing arts works inside. So a piece with 7 pieces inside, and it's pieces for woods and forests and paths and landscapes. You spend a day, like the end of an afternoon and the beginning of the evening, around 6 hours, just strolling in between places where you will see short pieces of about 40 minutes by 9 European or European-based artists that create for these different landscapes, and where the landscape is a protagonist of the proposition, and they're very diverse. You have like strange picnics, you have a lot of audio work, you have virtual reality of the landscape in other seasons than the season you're in that landscape. You have, so it's really fiction and poetry and tales of the landscape that emerge while you're in contact with that landscape. For us, it was very important to accompany this project of Stéphane Caegui and Caroline Barneau, because I think it's a project that sort of embodies a space of research that is quite impressive today, and that it corresponds to a wish of reconnecting with nature and with the natural world through the arts also, and proposing different experiences, escaping the traditional or contemporary architectures of the performing space, and going into a very, very, very old and at the same time open and free architecture, which is the natural space. And also for us, it's important with our ecological engagement, which is very, very strong at the festival, to have symbolic poetic translations of those concrete measures because we don't need, big speeches and idea. We need concrete measures and acceleration in the concrete measures at the ecological side, but we also need a poetic translation of that, and this is one of those projects.
Now, Avignon, you may not realize from the image of the Palais des Papes and the lavender fields and what have you, and the buzz of the festival, is actually a socially highly contested town in a region where there's a great deal of poverty, there's a great deal of social exclusion, and it's been, I know, an ambition of the festival to sort of acknowledge its hinterland and to invest in poorer areas. Now, Tim Etchells is this year invited to intervene in this sort of social ecology of the periphery of Avignon, in taking a very sort of light piece and introducing this into context, including the Avignon prison and village halls and what have you. And I wonder, Tim, would you like to join us and talk about this sort of the relationship between social and ecological spreading of the festival's energy? This is Tim Etchells.
Thank you. Good evening.
Tell us about your show, Tim.
Okay, so I mean, the frame of the project is a kind of it's an existing frame already, a project called Itinérance, which has been going, I think, since quite early on in the festival's history, like at least some decades, let's say. And the idea is that it's a work that travels around the towns and villages in the neighborhood of Avignon. It has to be super light on its feet, has to be capable of being performed in pretty much any kind of circumstances, shouldn't be too long, should be in French, and kind of arrive, set up, do the show, go, and then the next day the same, but in another location. So that was the kind of invitation/challenge that Tiago and Magda came to me with, and I was super excited. It's really not like something that I've done before, I would say, although I have made many works that are, let's say, light on their feet at least. This kind of slightly minimal, rough kind of theatricality is something that really interests me and appeals to me. And the new work is a collaboration with 2 other artists, one of whom, my clever idea was I invite somebody who's a native French speaker, My not so clever idea was that his kind of performing partner, so Bertrand Lescar is the native French speaker. Nassif Voustas, you can tell by the name already, is not a French guy. So the kind of initial idea was Bertrand is going to speak and Nassi will not speak. But after at least 1 week of rehearsal, it was clear they both had to speak. So Nassi is in the same position as Tiago in that he's a crash course in French, rehearsing the piece right now. So that's cool.
Yeah, because I'm really rigorous with these things. I would say that the idea of working around the festival is an old idea, but this specific project is an idea of Olivier P, my predecessor, and it became really strong in the last 8-9 years. What sort of changed is that instead of inviting a show already existing to tour, we have decided to invite an artist to create for this frame and produce it ourselves, so that it could tour further, so that it will do so during July in 16 locations, both outside Avignon, but also in some in the neighborhoods of Avignon, outside the walls of the city, and it will continue to do so during the rest of the year in the territory. Yeah, I'm curious about, because I'm here to open doors wide open to Avignon, to anyone. So I'm curious. You have a long story with the festival, Tim. What's your feeling about the festival? What can you tell us about the festival that sort of impressed you, or that comes to mind?
I mean, with Forced Entertainment, that's the company that I have worked with for, this will be 39 years this year. We performed once in Avignon at the invitation of Vincent Baudrier. And it is a really extraordinary festival. I think many of you will have been there, but I think this energy of doing that you speak about is really palpable. I mean, I'm a kind of festival skeptic, but actually the experience in Avignon is really intense, and you do find that you're kind of pulled into this energy, and yeah, it's a tremendous kind of context, I think. The breadth of work, the feverishness of the kind of context is really something special.
I'm mindful that we're coming to the end of our allotted time, and we would like to open it up to Q&A, including to people in Edinburgh. And I just want to point out the fact that we're three middle-aged blokes on the stage is not representative at all of the programming of the festival, which is 55% women this year. And perhaps, as we've been through a few of the shows, how about the opening show, Tiago, directed by Julie Deliquet, who will be astonishingly only the second female theatre director to direct the opening show in the Cour d'Honneur. What was driving your thought and your choice with this production?
Julie Deliquet has an amazing process of working with ensembles, with theater, with acting ensembles. So the way she researches and writes for these actors is very peculiar, very risky. Also, it really depends on each night, and there's a lot of research on sort of renewing the writing and the tensions on stage. And she's really inspired by translating into theater writing and theater staging cinema as if it was repertory. So it's not like doing cinema on stage. It's really someone who's perfected a skill to be nourished by cinema in order to create theater. So we were also very interested in this idea that she's engaged with repertory in a very fresh way, and she's adapting to the stage Welfare, this 1975 Frederick Weissman direct. I'm boring him. He's going away. when your partner on stage, you're going, no, it's. And so it's really it's a wonderful promise. Frederick Weissman, Oscar awarded director, he directed this. He shot this documentary, this film in 1975 in a gym in New York, which was an sort of improvised social welfare center, and it's about 15 heroes of, you know, sort of anonymous heroes, which are people that either work there or are just asking for help there. But there's a lot of Beckett going on in the way he edits all these stories. There's a lot of storytelling, a lot of real writing through editing, image, and there's a real sense of the violent beauty of human complexity going on. So I think it's perfect material for the way that Julie Deliquet works with actors, and we're really looking forward to see also this monument, Palais des Papes, so impressive, turned into a social welfare center for a while through theater. That's also something that sort of touches our hearts.
Now is the time for us to welcome the artists ici présents to come up on the stage to talk to Tiago.
Okay, we have Vicky Featherstone from the Royal Court, Pauline Bale, the Théâtre de Montreuil, Mr. Tim Crouch from wherever he's from, and Alexander Zeldin. You're there. So I probably start with Pauline. That's not what we had organized because we didn't organize it. I start with Pauline, who's gonna present at one of the most beautiful spaces of Avignon, Cloître des Carmes, an old cloister. Well, everything's old except the audience and the artists. A few of them are, because they're also wonderful. And it's the cloister it's one of these very inspiring spaces of Avignon, historical in its relation also with the festival. And Pauline will create there. She will do the premiere of her next piece, Écrire sa vie, based upon Virginia Woolf's life and work. And maybe you could tell us a bit about that.
Well, yes, thank you very much for the invitation. So yes, I'm working on a show based on Virginia Woolf's work, and well, my starting point was The Waves, a novel you probably know because you all know Virginia Woolf so well. And so when in March 2020, I reread The Waves for the purpose of a workshop I was about to give, and well, it was the first lockdown, and well, the chaos of the pandemic and the uncertainty of our lives at that moment really left me amazed compared to like how Virginia Woolf shines a light on the implacable forces which shape human condition. And among those forces, well, time going by and death, which were, everywhere at that moment. So that's really touched me, moved me, and especially in The Waves, how, the characters dive head-on into existence with an absolute desire for intensity despite all odds. So that was the starting point, and from that I decided I wanted to work on Virginia Woolf, and I collected very different materials, her journal and some short stories I didn't know before, and what I kept from The Waves in the show, writing and rehearsing the show, is the structure as a Bildungsroman. So we follow a group of friends from childhood to adulthood, and through like the journey of life and how the vagaries of life makes them to forces them to transform themselves. And friendship is one of the main theme we're trying to explore. There are 6 actors and actresses on stage in the Cloître des Carmes, which is obviously one of the most beautiful places in Avignon, so no pressure at all. And yes, another dimension we really explore is the language and its capacity to account for human existence in all its complexity. And when you think of friendship, the way we communicate to each other is so important to define yourself and to I could quote Judith Butler, who says that we are undone by each other through communication and language. And that's really something that interests me, how as I'm talking to you, the way you look at me and your silence or your have a huge impact, and if we talk to each other, how I will become someone else as we talk, and how this experience is inherent to life. So yeah, those are what we are working on. Yes, and come. Please come.
Thank you, Pauline. I'll come back to you, but I would so on the issue of memory and present, of history, of repertory, etc., one of the things that we're doing from now on is that every year we'll invite a piece that was created in the festival years ago, and do it more or less in the same conditions, in the same place. This year it will be En Attendant, this masterpiece by Anne-Therese de Keesmaker, Belgian legendary choreographer. And she created En Attendant at another cloister, the Cloître des Célestins, also an amazing place with 2 beautiful trees, and during sunset with no artificial light. And we will do it again exactly at the same time, because the sunset is at the same time than in 2010, 13 years ago. And in the same place, we will do another piece that has a long life, which is An Oak Tree by Tim Crouch. That will be, and that's something, an operation we're trying also to develop every year, introducing the audience of the festival to an artist with more than one work, trying to tell also the story of a body of work. So we will present An Oak Tree, created 15 years ago, 2005, so 18 years ago. 18 years ago, and we will present Truths and Dogmas to Kennel, created last year in Edinburgh. So with this sort of span of time, you will be in Avignon the entire festival from beginning to end, and participate in plenty of meetings. There will be new texts, new translations of your texts being read, and so there's this sort of body of work that will be arriving for the first time to the festival. How do you feel about it, Tim?
I'm honored, really. I went to the festival for the first time just last year, just to visit at your invitation, and to see almost like the density of the Edinburgh Festival in a small medieval city in a 90 degrees heat, with ash falling on us from the surrounding fires. It felt like, well, the Hieronymus Bosch feels right, actually, for the festival when I was there last year. So, yeah, I'm delighted to actually have the span of 2 shows, to be given that opportunity for the 2 shows to kind of talk to each other, because I do feel with all my work, it's just the same idea, just being repeated again and again and again, with a different story and a different form, but still, if you scratch beneath the surface, I'm still obsessing about similar things, which is around liveness, I suppose. So An Oak Tree has a sort of an idea of liveness hardwired into it, because There are two performers in that play. I'm one of them when the production is mine, and the second actor is different every time the play is performed. So an actor who meets me an hour before the show has no knowledge of the play, has not read or seen the play, and in that hour will not know the play. There'll be a conversation about openness and an invitation to listen and to play with me, and then the play begins by my invitation to them to come up onto the stage. It's a play that opened, like you said, 18 years ago, and I've been playing it on and off since then, to maybe 380 different actors now in the history of that show. And it's never a show that feels old for me as well, so I don't think theatre ever should really feel old. It's a fixed point. Every word in the play is scripted, but of course there's a transformation every time the play happens because of the presence of someone who is new to it, as there should be in the presence of an audience who is new to the work that they've come to see. So in many ways that second actor is a representative of the audience, or what I've come to term the avatar of the audience. They're on stage physically embodying what you might be having in your minds. And so that was the first one, and then Truth to Dog, Must to Kennel is my most recent piece, which again is about liveness. And in an oak tree, I imagine another audience. There's another audience watching the events in a room above a pub where a stage hypnotist is plying his wares. And in Truth to Dog, Must to Kennel, I imagine another audience. Another audience in another theatre watching another play. And the play that they're watching is a production of King Lear. It's a big capitalized production of King Lear. And I revisit that production by the process of applying a virtual reality headset to my eyes. It's an empty piece of kit. There's no technology in the play at all. There's nothing digital in that headset. It's an image of blindness, and it's an opportunity for a triggering of the imagination. So I suppose an oak tree is also a trigger for the imagination, is that the actor who plays the character in an oak tree shouldn't kind of look anything like the character that they're described as, and you as an audience for Truth to Dog will not look like anything like the other audience that exists in relation to that fictional production of King Lear. And the hook for Truth to Dog is the idea of the fool in King Lear returning to the play that he leaves. And I think the play was written out of lockdown and out of a sense of departure, of quitting, of getting out, of having had enough, and also having spent 2.5 years watching fucking theatre through a screen. And coming to the end of my tether, really, with that. So yeah, there is an image of someone reading through from a screen, interspersed with a series of stand-up routines, I suppose, that get us to think about whether what we're doing has any worth anymore. So quite a depressing piece in some ways, but I think ultimately, because of its appeal to the imagination, positive.
It's your first time in Avignon presenting your work. Some of your pieces have been translated and performed in France, but have you performed in France before?
I mean, here's the irony. No, I've performed all over the place, but I've never performed in France. I've performed in Belgium, but never in France.
And have you already enrolled at Alliance Française here in because ça va won't make it.
What?
No, ça va and merci. Yeah.
In England, we just speak more loudly. And that seems to have the desired effect, if you shout or just speak loudly. I mean, it's desperate, isn't it? But it is. I made a show once for a gallery piece called England, which was about the inability of the English to speak any other language, for there to be no act of transplant between England and any other country.
But I do remember your promise of learning French until
Yeah,
July.
I have a book at home. I do have a book at home.
Someone who doesn't need to learn French because he's bilingual and has been presenting often his work in France and producing in France and creating pieces and wonderful work with French actors also is Alexander Zeldin. Thank you for being there, Alexander. But now you'll be with an English-speaking production that connects Australia and the UK. Can you tell us a bit about The Confessions?
Yeah, first of all, big respect for getting Tim Crouch's work to France, because that's very important. I'm a huge fan. And yeah, okay, I'll tell you about the confessions. I haven't planned how I'm going to tell you about it, so I'll do it right now. I want to really make you feel what it is to be in the presence of, or to see a whole life from birth till death, to behold a whole life in the theatre. Is the theatre able to make us feel the value of a life? Truly. This is a really big fucking question, and I think it is. The starting point for this project was I did a trilogy called The Inequalities that started with a play called Beyond Caring that I made for 10p at the Yard, and then Love and Faith and Charity, and all those have been in France. And then I did a play in Paris called A Death in the Family, Une Mort dans la Famille. And that play, for the first time, I sort of felt, I think there's enough make-believe in life. So when I go to the theatre, I need to feel like theatre is helping me get closer to life. Because in life, I find that it's hard to feel life. So I need theatre to get me closer to life. And so I was very inspired by a book I read like a few years ago called The Years by Annie Ernaux, which is like a whole life. And my mum was dying, and so I thought, fuck it, I'll interview my mum. And I did 8 hours of interviews of my mother, who was born in Australia, and first person in her family, very simple kind of background, first person to go to university, a very conservative life that I didn't know about. So I discovered that she'd married a naval officer when she was like 16, that he'd tried to push her off a cliff after 7 years of marriage, and that she turned around and stared at him and decided that she would sell the house and divorce him and spend all the money to go back to university in her 30s. And she joined the women's liberation movement in Sydney, which was quite something at that time. And then it went on and it chronicled a rape I didn't know about and a discovery of how she tried to break through that and invent herself, create herself. And it reminded me a bit of like Jaques' The 7 Ages of Man. And it became clear to me I was going to tell the story of 7 chapters of a life, 7 loves. This is obviously quite ambitious, but I've started it. I'm on day 3 of rehearsal, and I have got a script. It's about 18 hours long. It won't be 18 hours long.
Okay, thank you.
That's it. I mean, I can say more. Basically, it's chronicling an entire life. It's about 3 hours long. It's chronicling an entire life from Australia through to now, and it's a real life. It's based on complete truth, and it's an attempt to see if theatre can measure up to that challenge, because in the intervening years, like Tim was talking about the pandemic, like one thing I took away from the pandemic was every night I'd turn on my TV and realize Boris Johnson had helped 1,000 people go to the grave early by carelessness. And I saw 1,000 names pop up. And it just occurred to me, each life is worthy of a miracle and of care. And I think theatre is a place where you can really feel what life is. And so I want to try and measure up to that in my work. It will be very, very funny from beginning to end. It's a joke, 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 terrible thing, joke, joke, joke. That's it. And the lights are on in the audience. I don't know what else to say. Oh yeah, the music is by Yanis Philippakis from Foals, so it's kind of rock as well. My producer tells me never to say that because it sounds really cheesy, but I think that's important. I'm very proud to make my debut in the Avignon Festival, thanks to you. And I just want to say, isn't this cool that we're like in Britain? And thank you to the Institut Français and the British Council, yay. Keep going. It's brilliant that we're here. And
They're new, they're starting, but they're getting there.
Yeah, one step by step. One day they'll also hopefully support my work. That will be a great day. God bless.
Well, joke, 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 terrible thing, joke, joke, joke. I'm going to keep that one. The Confessions by Alexander Zeldin, joke, 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 terrible thing, joke, joke, joke. Also debuting at the Festival d'Avignon, although it's not a first time for the Royal Court to be present at Festival d'Avignon, because ages ago, Katie Mitchell started her continental Europe, or as you say in the UK, Europe, life in... I had to say this one, I'm sorry. Because I'm so careful to say continental Europe to include everyone, and you just like say Europe. So it's already, yeah. So it was a bit this sort of European life of Katie Mitchell that sort of started there also, but we are happy to have the Royal Court once again, also because it's quite important. We mentioned, or Andrew mentioned, Edinburgh with its also birth in '47 and this sort of post-war great symbols that addressed a theatre as you know, a part of a construction of what's to come after the Second World War, and I think somehow also the Royal Court belongs, is part of this history where Avignon belongs, Piccolo Theatre in Milan belongs, and other adventures throughout Europe. So it's great to have the Royal Court again. Reason why we, besides all of it that we will be presenting and that I will ask you to describe, we'll also be doing readings with connecting the Royal Court. And thank you so much for your hospitality and enthusiasm about this work with Adami and the young talents from Adami, 8 young French actors that will be doing readings of British authors, not only British, but authors that are connecting to the Royal Court and producing work at the Royal Court. And we'll do this program next to the presentation of all of it. And probably I would just ask you to tell us a bit about all of it, about about all of it.
Okay, I will begin. Yes, just echoing Alexander, it's a real privilege and honour for the Royal Court to be invited to your first festival, Tiago, which is extraordinary. And it feels so exciting that it is focusing on the English language, because there is a lot of shame around the English language if you believe in an international world. And often the work that we make, as I've always worked in new writing, is translated, but the fact that it's going to be heard and seen in the language that the writers write it in is really extraordinary for Ali McDowell. Alistair McDowell is a playwright who really calls the Royal Court his home, and we've been part of developing and producing most of his work. And the 2 plays which I've directed are called X and The Glow, and the last one was The Glow. And while he was writing The Glow, which took him 5 or 6 years to write, he was really struggling to create this piece of art. So he gave himself a break and wrote another piece of art to save him from the piece of art that was killing him. And the piece of art that he wrote was called All of It. And he came to my office and he said, "Is Carol Churchill the only person that's allowed to have short plays on at the Royal Court? Or are the other writers allowed to too?" And I was like, "Of course." And I hadn't read it. And All of It is the story of a woman's life from the moment that she is born to the moment that she dies. But what Ali is playing with... Yeah. She's not real, she's made up. But the thing that Ali has been playing with is language, and is the idea of claiming language. And so we did a performance of All of It. He wrote it for this actress, Kate O'Flynn. And we did a performance of it, very small, just before lockdown. And then during lockdown, Ali was reflecting on the fact that he'd written a story about this woman, and in his house that he was trapped in Manchester, he was thinking about other people that had been in that house. And then he wrote another monologue called Northleigh 1940, which is about a woman and her father trapped in this house during an air raid. And then wrote another monologue called In Stereo. And Sam Pritchard, who's our very brilliant associate director who works in our international department, and I are directing these 3 monologues. And what's extraordinary about them is they're about the interior lives of 3 very incredibly ordinary women who are just existing. We've realised there is a connection, and looking at them all together, they desire to write or to express themselves, but they don't feel that they can take that space in so many ways. And so Ali has given them their interior lives. And they're 3 different women, but Kate will play them all. And the experiment that we're playing with, it's so exciting, isn't it? Because we don't know if any of these pieces are going to work, do we? we're all in the middle of making them. The sort of creative energy around it is so thrilling, isn't it?
Just trying to make me nervous.
But the thing that we're looking at is how do you help an audience to listen differently to the three pieces in terms of the style and the form of them, and how do we, first of all, maybe with they work in chronological order, and with the first one, Sam is looking at the idea of, we do know the space that we're actually in, that she's talking from, but she's expressing her interior world, so that's more conventional as a narrative. In the second one, there is a woman and her house is now empty, and there is a big stain on the wall, and she sees herself on her television, and then she splits into 8 voices, which we will have to find how we do that with one actress. And these 8 voices work at once, which are all the multi-facets of this character, of this woman. And then the final one, all of it, is a woman from the moment that she's born to the moment that she dies. So yeah, that's what it is.
I just probably will do a round about experiences in Avignon as a spectator. It's also your first time with work in Avignon, Pauline, but it's not your first time at Avignon or at the festival. What's your feeling of the festival? Is there a memory, for instance, of the first time that was important for you, or performances that sort of impacted you?
Well, I'm really gonna seem, if I'm honest about that, you're not gonna like it, because I think it was one of your shows that gave me one of my most intense experiences as a spectator.
We just changed the subject.
We'll change it. Will not talk about that. No, but Avignon is I think to me it's great. Like an honor and a great challenge too, because so we're doing the play outside, and theater is about the present moment, and acting outside is really convoking, inviting everything that can happen, like the winds and the noises because it's very noisy, people all over the streets playing music, and I think that's great for theater to bring life during the performance, because that's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be hit by life and manage and how to remain and become more alive thanks to that. So to me, that's that challenge of welcoming anything that can happen in that wonderful place, that the Couloir des Carmes. I think that's what excites me the most.
Alexander, do you have memories of Avignon?
Yeah, I mean, I got to go to Avignon, I think the first time in 2012, when I was, I guess, 27, something like that, 26, I can't remember. And it was overwhelming because, in England, we don't get to see as much international work as people that live in Paris or in Brussels or wherever do. And I think that what little the British young artists in Britain do see, they kind of grab and hold on to, and sometimes kind of repeat it. It's beautiful. It was a great opportunity for me. But I remember I was at I think it was the first performances of Thomas Ostermeyer's Enemy of the People. Yeah. It was the first time that legendary production was on, and he did this thing, and many of you have maybe heard of it or seen it if you're in the theatre, because it's such a legendary production, but he kind of broke the fourth wall and passed a mic round during the town hall scene. And I remember just this opened up so many possibilities for me, which I did in a very different way, but just feeling that excitement of a festival being a place where a risk is taken and a work is suddenly brought. And the other thing was just how many people are obsessed with theatre.
Yeah.
And my first experience of Avignon, though, was my first job, which was, you mentioned I speak French, and it was, I got to surtitle Sophie Fiennes' movie about Alain Platel, which was a great experience, because I got to watch Alain Platel, who's, I think, one of the best theatre makers ever, doing 25 hours of him and his dancers and collaborators talking about making dance theatre, and it was all in Avignon. So I had this longing for this kind of festival of joy, and all these audience members were interviewed about it, and the depth and the way that people in France particularly, but also in Avignon and Avignon specifically, so invested in theatre as a way of talking about the experience of being alive. And in Britain they are too, of course, but we do have to elbow our way in Britain, and that's good as well for us, I think, in some ways. It helps us but that's a longer conversation. But yes, I do have very vivid memories of Avignon for the reasons I said.
You've worked a long time with Peter Brook, and he changed also the history of Avignon. And Avignon partly also interfered strongly with his history, especially with Mahabharata in 85, creating this myth around this quarry. Would he speak about Avignon? Do you remember him talking about Avignon or the Mahabharata, or that experience of creating the piece there, that adventure?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny being here, because the last time I was in this theatre, I was with Peter, who was doing a presentation of Tell Me Lies, which is his Vietnam War movie. Incredible, like no one knows this movie, maybe some of you do, but it's an incredible experimental film that he was shown here. And it was such a beautiful kind of embracing of how much he managed to be across the channel. Yeah, I mean, he did speak about it, and I just remember him, saying something quite funny, which was that he left at sundown and came back at sunrise one time just to see the audience, and he'd do that quite a lot. But I know it was a deeply significant thing. But he had several beautiful experiences in Avignon, I think. He did the Tempest, didn't he, Andrew, as well? Yeah, and the Conference of the Birds, But I think for him, coming to France was, in 72 or whatever it was like a real opener, and Avignon was a big part of that, I think. So yeah, it was. I mean, he'd be thrilled that you were putting English, because one of his last books was about language and the sensitivity.
Tip of the tongue.
Tip of the tongue, yeah, which you've thought about a lot in your work, actually, this sensitivity to different languages and meanings and resonances, and you were talking about that earlier. And I think he'd be deeply moved that English is being given that space, because he loved English, I think. So, yeah.
One of the things about the English language is that it translates a lot also in all our communication work. We do something that it's not. I mean, it might not sound like a very important thing, but the communication is bilingual. The program of Festival d'Avignon is bilingual, French and English at an equal state, the same size of the same words in both languages, and that was really an adventure, and it's symbolically. It's really important for us to state and talking about communication. This will, I mean, I'm not good at building bridges myself either, but it just builds a bridge for two people I forgot that are also from the team of Festival d'Avignon, also present. It was just that they were not on the row. Margot and Arnaud. Margot that newly arrived to the team of the festival that works in the team of communication, and Arnaud, our press attaché, that is also here present, and I had to name them. The whole festival is also a lot of activity and a lot of artistic projects around the performances, the selection, the 44 performances of the festival, and there also English will have an important place. We will have a lot of meetings in our Café des Idées, the Café of Ideas, which is the meeting place of the festival, where we'll have someone who is here tonight with our researcher and teacher, Maria Delgado, who will be participating in this Café des Idées and discussing about English language and theater writing. We will have people like Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie coming from Nigeria to talk about English language in connection with feminism and feminism today. We will have plenty of invited people. We will have readings of British authors in several programs. The creation of the most amazing radio in the world. I'm sorry, all the other countries. France Culture, who is doing a radio creation on readings of texts by Kay Tempest or other British authors. So there's a lot of a whirlwind of things around the festival or around the selection, which are also the heart of the festival. This sort of fever that you find in the public, but you also find in the way of living this festival for 3 months. And I'm curious, coming back to Vicky, because you know the festival and we've met there last year, but you're going there this year. What's the feeling of facing this fever when you're going to do it for the first time? What's and having visited last year, and I can assure you, yeah, we had wildfires around, so we were really in touch with all the spaces around the festival, and there was a lot of work put there by firefighters and organizations, so that this year we're really as safe as possible in this climate crisis, but even making an important extra effort. By the way, one of the places that burned the big wildfire was in the Montagnette, which is this natural site in the village of Barbentane. It was the 18th of July, the fire, and that's why we'll be with the people of Barbentane with the performance by Team Etchells, the 18th of July, presenting there the show, also to mark that moment. And we're changing schedule and timetable of performances. For instance, we're avoiding the middle of the day, because it's true that demanding audiences to circulate in the city when it's the hottest is not up to date anymore. So there's also a lot of evolution in the organization of the festival to answer to these times, but still say that doing an international festival, doing it in the summer, in a time where we risk closing all over Europe, is absolutely necessary, that we need moments of openness and crossroads and meeting. If we can do it by the shadow of a tree, an oak tree, we will do so. But if it's a little sunny, we will stand it. And Vicky, how do you anticipate this visit in July?
It's making my heart beat faster, especially being here with everybody, and the idea of the voice of Ali and spoken by Kate coming out into the world, out of England, and sharing the kind of space with all these amazing artists is really so exciting. And I've just had the most unbelievable memory being here, which is that I went to university in 1985, and a lot of my friends at university had all been to this very cool place in Paris that I'd never heard of, called Jacques Lecoq, and the school. And we got to our end of our summer term, and they said, we're driving. And we drove, and I didn't know it was Avignon, to see the Mahabharat in a quarry, and I didn't know where it was. And I have the photos. I have photos at home of this. And then we drove back, and then we went to Glasgow to see it again in the tramway. So I've literally just realised that that's where that was today. I had no idea, because I was 18 and I was drunk, and it was extraordinary, and it was very long, and it was transformative. That's incredible, isn't it? I will bring the photos.
It is. It is. It's almost like written in a script for us to sort of go into the next level of this conversation. Before we go into the Q&A, I would just like to acknowledge a few partners, because I'm really bad at doing it. So I take it really strictly. There's a few partners that partnered up with a few of these artists and other artists that we want to acknowledge, like, of course, the Royal Court, that has been beyond their duty next to us, in not only in the organization of all of it coming here, but also with many other partnerships, and helping also to organize this event. The National Theatre, co-producer of the Confessions, with the support also of the Arts Council of England. I don't know why you complain about the British Council. the cornet theater that supports and co-produces the L'Addition created by Tim Etchells, the Royal Lyceum Theatre in Edinburgh, where you created Truths to Dogmas to Kennel, and Made in Scotland that supports also the presentation of this piece in Avignon, and Manchester International Festival, also co-producer of one of the projects being presented in Avignon, so I just had to acknowledge the important support and partnership of these partners and their openness from the first moment, either in dialoguing with us or with an artist to be next to us in this adventure, which is, of course, I want to assure you, the beginning of a path. We know that we don't want, while we invite the English language to the Festival d'Avignon, to say, check, now we'll see you in 10 years. We're building bridges. They're not complete. So it's the beginning, hopefully, of collaborations and a bigger presence of the English language or English-speaking theater and performing arts and dance artists also coming from English-speaking countries in the festival, which we desperately need. And when it comes to the UK, we desperately need to be in dialogue, and it's a rich dialogue, and we're looking forwards, so that this year is the beginning of many years of collaboration.
Tiago, that's a fantastic note to end on, and I would just say we have to leave very quickly, and I would recommend that you all just run out and get onto the website and buy your tickets right now, because they're selling out fast.
Thank you so much.